Well, it's obviously important, especially in these underdog best ball drafts, to make those early round picks that potentially give you, league winning upside, like the Jamar Chases last year, like the Saquon Barkleys last year. It's also pretty important to avoid those landmines, those guys last year, like Marvin Harrison Jr., Tyreek Hill, Brees Hall, players like that who also derailed your season and pretty much ended any chance of advancing or winning any of these tournaments. So I got 5 players I'm going to talk about today that seems like everybody is really high on right now based on how high they're being drafted, and I'm just not feeling it. Now, before I get to those picks, if you want to try out some of these drafts on Underdog Fantasy for as little as $3 per draft, just go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Join using promo code ENDGAME, because not only will that get you access to these drafts, but also up to $1,000 in bonus cash plus a free pick. Let's start with the rookie, Ashton Giante. Yes, this guy is awesome. He's a great player. Nothing against the player. I think he's going to have a fantastic career, but he's currently going as pick 14, the RB6 on Underdog Drafts right now, and I think this is just too ambitious. I mean, let's go back a couple years ago, Bijan Robinson. Now, Bijan Robinson did not, have the prolific season that Ashton Giante had, but he was a great prospect in every sense of the word, and we saw here in year 2 he was absolutely fantastic. But what did we see in year 1? He was just okay, right? People, myself included, I'll freely admit it, were overdrafting him in the first round. Same thing last year with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., this generational talent at wide receiver, and didn't really pan out if you drafted him in the first round or early second round. And now we're seeing the same thing with Ashton Giante. It seems like there's always one rookie that every year people want to draft, first round draft capital. And sure, sometimes it works out, but there's also a lot of risk here. We're talking about a running back that, we don't even know where this guy is playing right now. We don't know if he's going to land in a spot similar to what we saw with Bijan Robinson, where he's got another established back there that maybe he's not the clear workhorse running back in line for 300 plus touches, but also B, he's going ahead of guys like Christian McCaffrey. Now, I get it, the injury risk there, but we know a healthy Christian McCaffrey has more upside than Ashton Giante. Jonathan Taylor, who's still in the prime of his career, a fantastic workhorse running back. Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Brees Hall even. These guys that we, sure, that nobody is risk-free in fantasy football. We know this, but we know what their roles are probably going to be. We know they're good players. We know they're established workhorse running backs. We don't know that about Giante. And even if you give the argument, which I use a lot for rookies, for why this is a good time to draft rookies, is because, hey, if after the combine, nothing's going to change for Ashton Giante after the combine, let's be real. But if after the NFL draft, if he lands in a smash spot, his ADP is going to shoot up. Well, how much is Giante's ADP really going to shoot up? I mean, okay, maybe he goes from pick 14 to pick 11, pick 10. I mean, you're not getting like a huge discount here, but on the flip side, if he goes somewhere where there is an established vet or he's not the clear workhorse in line for 300 touches, we could see his ADP drop quite a bit, and now everybody who picked him at this spot basically losing value with that pick, which you never want to do. So I think the hype is just a little too high on Giante right now, especially before the NFL draft. And especially when you see other running backs, like the other good running backs in this class, like Caleb Johnson, Amario Hampton, Travion Henderson, they're going in like the 60s, pick 60s. I would rather just wait and get one of those guys. So love the player. Think he's going to have a great career, but just think he's being a little overdrafted right now. And I already talked about Brock Bowers being overdrafted, and nothing's changed. This guy is still being way overdrafted right now. Pick 17, obviously the first tight end off the board. But again, at pick 17, you're talking about high-end, low-end wide receiver ones, mid RB ones type guys, and now we're talking about a tight end. And for as good as Brock Bowers was last year, and Brock Bowers was great, no doubt about it, he still only averaged 15.5 PPR points per game. If you go to half PPR, it was even less, which is fine, which is great for a tight end, but that's not what we're looking for in the second round when there are still, again, top 10, top 11 wide receivers on the board, top 6, 7, 8 running backs on the board, guys that can give you those huge, 20 to 30 point weeks, not to mention the high floors. I know Brock Bowers, maybe the Raiders are almost certainly going to do something at QB. They did bring in Pete Carroll, but really, is Brock Bowers going to get so good that he's going to pay off a early to mid second round ADP? I just don't see it, especially at a position like tight end where in almost every league, including here in best ball drafts, even though I know you do draft multiple tight ends, you're only starting one tight end a week most of the time. So I just feel like you're giving up too much at the other positions, wide receiver and running back, to take a tight end that basically has to have a Travis Kelce type of season. I'm not talking about Travis Kelce last year. I'm talking about Travis Kelce a few years ago. He has to have that type of season to make this pick worth it. That is a big ask for a guy, especially only going into year 2 here, in an offense that still has a lot of question marks. So I'd rather just wait on tight end, get one of those guys later, Frankenstein a tight end, a 3 tight end build together, take one of those high-end wide receivers or running backs here. Again, not saying Brock Bowers is going to be a bust this year. I think if you draft Brock Bowers, you'll be fine with it. He'll be one of the top tight ends, if not the top tight end. I just don't think he's going to be good enough at that position to pass on the high-end wide receivers and running backs you can get here. And then a guy that was a major bust last year, that is Tyreek Hill, was a top 3 basically pick in every single draft and wasn't worth even like a 3rd round pick in any single draft. And now we're still seeing this guy going at pick 23, which means he's going end of the 2nd round as the wide receiver 12, a top 12 wide receiver. I understand the one side here where it's like, well, it's Tyreek Hill. We know the upside he has if he can bounce back. But you look at it the 2 years prior in Miami, prior to last year, he had over a 30% target share. Last year, that dropped all the way down to 21%. Why? Because we saw the emergence of Devon Achane as a true pass-catching running back and Jonnu Smith as an integral part of this offense at tight end. There were just more mouths to feed in this offense. It wasn't just, Tyreek Hill getting the bulk of the targets with Jalen Waddle getting, the second most bulk and then nobody else really getting targets. They spread the ball around more, not to mention defenses, now they've seen this offense a couple times with Mike McDaniel. They know what to look for. They found ways to scheme Tyreek Hill out. And we got to wonder, Tyreek Hill getting a little up there in age, into his 30s now. Has he lost a little bit of a step? I mean, he's still a burner. He's still got speed, but has he lost that little bit of a step to get that separation, that elite separation that we've seen? I think this is just name value alone. I think this is people just, expecting him to be able to bounce back to something close to what we saw the 2 years prior to last year, but it rarely works that way when a guy gets to this part of their career, this age of their career. It's not like he's 27, 28, still in his prime. Again, into his 30s now. Sure, he'll probably be better than he was last year. I don't doubt that because last year was arguably his worst season since his rookie year. But I also don't think he's going to be good enough to be a top 12 wide receiver. There's still a lot of high upside guys in this range that I would just rather take over Tyreek Hill here. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it's very rare that we see a guy bounce back to have a career type of year at this age. So I think Tyreek Hill just being overdrafted based on name value right now. And Chase Brown last year was one of those picks that if you made it, he potentially won you your fantasy championship. But I think people are a little too crazy for Chase Brown right now. Currently going pick 31, running back 12. So we're talking about a 3rd round, like a mid-3rd round pick here as a top 12 running back, which I think would be an absolute smash and absolute value if I felt like the Bengals were going to do nothing at running back. But they're going to do something at running back. They almost have to. They can't roll in the next season expecting Chase Brown to handle 80, 90% of the snaps again. Number one, he's not really built for that. And number two, I don't think that's what any team in today's NFL really wants. So I think we're going to see the Bengals do something either in the draft or in free agency or both at the running back position. And this is an extremely deep running back class. So the Bengals don't even have to use an early, like 1st, 2nd round pick. They could wait till a 3rd round, and still get a talented running back who could take touches away from Chase Brown. It's just hard for me to envision the Bengals who are, they already said they're going to franchise tag T. Higgins. They're probably going to lock him up to an extension. They know they want to pay Ja'Marr Chase here pretty soon, Burrow, probably Trey Hendrickson. So they're going to want to probably draft a rookie on his rookie deal. And I just think it's going to take too much away from Chase Brown for him to pay off a top 12 running back ADP. So yes, Chase Brown has been a guy. We've basically been hyping up Chase Brown the last 2 years. It finally paid off last year, thankfully. But now I think he's getting too hyped in fantasy drafts. And then my last pick is going to be Xavier Worthy of the Chiefs, going at pick 37. So basically right at the end of the 3rd round, wide receiver 20. And again, I think this is just too optimistic for Xavier Worthy when there's a lot of question marks in this Chiefs offense. Yes, he had a nice finish to the season. We saw him kind of assert himself as the wide receiver one. I know somebody's going to comment down below that he had one of the greatest receiving games ever in Super Bowl history. It was all incomplete garbage time. The guy had 8 yards at the half. Like, don't talk to me about that Super Bowl performance. But look, he was good down the stretch in fantasy and in real life. But we know Rashee Rice is going to be back at some point. They're probably going to bring back Hollywood Brown on another one-year deal. And we're talking about them potentially pulling off a trade or maybe also drafting a wide receiver. You got to think it's still a position of need. It's still, they did not have anybody in that game when it mattered that could get open for Patrick Mahomes and get separation. This is still a major area of need. So I don't think we're going to see Xavier Worthy going into next season as a wide receiver one on the Chiefs, which I feel like this draft capital is kind of saying we think he's going to be the wide receiver one on the Chiefs. I think they're going to do something either in free agency, in the draft, maybe both. They got to do something to help Patrick Mahomes. He had no help in that game at all. So I just think Xavier Worthy, again, kind of like Rashee Rice last year, right? Had a nice end of the season, was getting way hyped up. And now I think the same thing is happening with Xavier Worthy. I just think this is just what happens with Chiefs wide receivers, especially young ones like Worthy and Rice. Just way too high for my blood here. I think we're going to see the Chiefs do something in the offseason at wide receiver, and we're going to see his ADP drop down significantly. I don't want to draft guys that I think are going to lose value as the offseason goes on, and I think that's what's going to happen to Xavier Worthy. So now you know some players I'm not really in fantasy drafts on Underdog or in 2025 this year, but who do I think are the best picks in every single round of drafts right now? Well, you can find out in this video right here.